Gold participants from around the world. I'm Fleur Bickford, Program Director and MC for Gold Midwifery. I'm here today with Gauri Lowe, and we are talking about her upcoming presentation titled A Sacred Model of Birth, Reality or Fantasy. So, Dr. Lowe, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, Fleur. Thank you.
So, we're going to chat a little bit about your upcoming presentation for Gold Midwifery. But first of all, I was wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey.
Sure. So I know it's quite rare to have a medical doctor who even talks about the word sacred in relation to birth. And that has been my experience also studying medicine. But my whole path has not been very conventional, I guess. So I started medicine. I'm a medical doctor, and during my course of medicine, I was always more inclined towards natural, holistic medical practices, but on a general level. And in my third year of medicine, I gave birth to my son, and that really changed my whole perspective about everything, including motherhood. What happened was that he was born at home. And I had an independent midwife, and the experience left me feeling so touched with the depth of raw earth, organic, empowered energy that I felt it was the most amazing, awesome, empowered, connected passagehood into motherhood. And I became completely convinced that this entry into motherhood and this experience of birth was the very thing every mother was worthy of and had a birthright to receive. So it was gentle, it was non-invasive, it was faithful, it was physiological and beautiful. And as I met my own inner strength and power I never knew existed in that process. So that really completely curveballed my whole professional career. I actually wanted to drop out of medicine and become a midwife. But my midwife convinced me to stay in medicine. And from that experience, then further on, I went to engage in many clinical practices in government hospitals in South Africa, which are known for being very resource limited, staff limited, and burdened with heavy maternity morbidities. Poverty, crime, abuse. So I was working in this regard, and that also opened me up to a very big reality of birth that was more balanced, I would say. That I had had this most amazing birth, and then I could see a complete other side of the scale that many ladies were receiving in whatever capacity, was it, if it was from prenatal care or even the way babies were being conceived, the amount of abuse and all the horror stories. I really saw them all, and I worked in tertiary and secondary hospitals, so I was not naive to preeclampsia, eclampsia, preterm babies, maternal deaths, and baby HIE, and all these things became a very big reality to me, and I really struggled with trying to bring this connection that I had had in my own birth and trying to bring that as a reality, because I became convinced now that this was what every person needed. Well, not every person needed, but what every person had a birthright and was worthy to receive. And I use those words because I know that we cannot control birth. So we can plan an amazing home birth, but that doesn't mean that this is what our child and us ourselves need to have. But whatever the actual activity or the actual event that happens at our birth should always be held with a sacred awareness and consciousness. And that became my driving point, and I really had to refine it and redefine it and re-look at my word of using sacred, because it has many other connotations. And I kept coming back to this model is what is needed to transform birth, and then my studies and my work with other midwives and with other birth carers and with research and so many different aspects and psychology just kind of reinforced why a sacred birth model of care is so important, and not just something nice or something a mother can choose, but actually why it's so important not only for a mother having a baby and a family having a new member joining them, but actually on a completely societal and global level of transforming humankind. So then this work became much bigger and became a passion for me that I was found very difficult to put aside.
Okay, thank you so much. And that, you know, your passion really comes across when you're talking, and it's wonderful. And it's, you know, it's beautiful listening to you talk about your own birth and, you know, what a wonderful experience that was for you. Because I think so often when we hear, you know, women talking about birth, it's not that kind of story. It's, you know, we hear a lot about the birth trauma that happens, and it's, you know, it's more and more, it's kind of unusual to hear women talk about birth the way, you know, you talk about your experience when your son was born. And it's wonderful. That was obviously very, you know, transformative for you. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. So I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about what you're going to touch on in your presentation and what you hope the Gold delegates will be able to take away from your presentation back to their own practices.
Sure. So for me, I would consider sacred as meaning a way of connecting to a higher power. Sacred in a way of bringing in a sense of awe and respect and dignity, and an honoring of an inner connection and an inner womanhood. So this is why I use the word sacred. Sacred, respecting and connecting with a higher power, which we all have our own names for. But these became that aspect of faith and surrender. These became important aspects in birth, and these are the very things I felt could be expanded on and infiltrated and taught and brought in on a very practical level too into hospital models, into home birth models. I forgot to add in my introduction that I have worked, and I still do work with home births, and I worked with home birth midwives in South Africa and India. And I believe the sacred model of birth is much more prevalent there, but there are many things which can also be expanded on, because the sacred model of birth is not only what we're giving to the mother in terms of having or facilitating the most sacred and the most wonderful experience for her. No, even if there is birth trauma, the actual, I mean, not birth trauma, but birth intervention or some kind of medical intervention that has to occur, it can be carried out with a sacred respect and consciousness. So many of the aspects that came alive to me were simply in comparing a sacred a medical model of birth, which is quite easy to define on one end of the scale. It's technology inclined. Doctors are taught to, and I can speak out of personal experience, we're taught to notice when there is something wrong. We're taught to completely be alert for that problem and then act on it. And many times we are taught to see warning signs and then to balance our reaction. So that's kind of where the doctors are coming from. And then now there's just the huge aspect of litigation, which has brought in this complete fear, and the fear also coming because a doctor will normally or often, well, the role of the doctor is to kind of correct the pathology. So if there is no pathology and there's the physiology is just carrying on, the doctor will seldom be brought in to a birth setup. Doctors are, pathologists really. So there's no courting for supporting physiological birth. I think we got a half-an-hour lecture on the hormones of birth, of labor, at medical school, and was probably part of just a bigger lecture of pregnancy signs or something. So there's really not enough emphasis. They don't know. They're not given the tools unless they have their own experience like me, or they go out and they actually make a concerted effort to bring it into their practice. So we see that with the medical care. And then the midwifery care, what I have found is that that can almost be divided up, because by definition the midwifery care is very nice. It's midwife with women. It's very family inclusive. It's more patient-centered, so you're listening to the midwife. But I found it lacked so much freedom because, and it's completely getting disempowered by the medical model, because we are having to depend on doctors as backup, which we should be having doctors as backup. That's just intelligent practice. But then they become controlling, and then you have to do certain things to maintain their backup, and it becomes further and further away from the actual midwifery model, because we're having to it's almost cut down on our integrity, and just live up to things which might not be conducive. I hope that's clear. That in my practice I could give some examples, but physiological birth cannot always be timed, and a medical birth is very on the clock. So if things are going over a certain time, then the doctor will be edgy, and then so often we end up not that we end up transferring to the hospital often, but if we transfer to the hospital, we are met with such criticism and such distaste. So that is not fair for one to continue a midwifery model of care. And so those two models were not sufficient for me. And I thought they both needed that sacredness and they needed that humanness. And then that for me would include a sense of supporting how we support a mother and a labor. So what we need to know about physiological labor, what we need to know about this mother, what we need to know about her history, her psychology, her needs, what she is and what she has expressed for her whole, the whole family. You need to know the dynamics. And then what you also need is to be able to hold the space. And that is very difficult, because it's not that only doctors have seen a challenging side of birth, but midwives have also seen that challenging side of birth, and we know things can go wrong, and we know things can go wrong quickly. And I've seen it and I've been there. So for a midwife to hold the space of a sacred birth, what really comes into it is a matter of debriefing and avoiding burnout, because when we're doing so many births a month, it is very difficult to have a balanced life and basically get the sleep you need. You're holding space for so much women at any time. So we really have to take care of ourselves and be able to have a focus and a space of integrity for every birth, and otherwise our projections do come across. So these aspects are just a little kind of insight into what I found became important in the practical application. And then the whole reason why was for me mostly because, well, women are sacred, and women do need this, because woman is not only mother of the child that she is bringing into the world, but woman is mother in society. And really getting in touch with what that means as a sacred woman with a womb, a woman, means so much gentleness, kindness, compassion, nurturing, so many aspects like that. I really go into that side, not the sensuality or the sexuality of being woman, but really being in touch with that feminine side, which is really the backbone of society, and men cannot do that. So that is a real, women hold a sacred role in society, no matter what we try and do or say about it. So really, realizing that aspect as woman, as mother, not only for the baby that she is bringing into the world, and what that means on a family level and a society level, and then as well, just the actual imprints and the psychology and the neural connections that are taking place in a baby during pregnancy and during birth. And once you know about that, you really need to support that for the least traumatic and most connected experience for that baby, because he'll carry these imprints into his future life as child and adult. And that baby is just one baby, but he becomes a member of society, which is made up of many members of societies who were once babies. So it's an amazing opportunity to really transform society if we take a look at birth, because really everyone is born. Mm-hmm. So this is a little bit more about what it means to me, practically, and then the reason why as well.
Okay, thank you so much. You really have a beautiful way of looking at all of it, and I love that you're really talking about a way of looking at it in general that can be applied to, any model of birth, whether, we have somebody who has to give birth in hospital or it's a home birth, and, it's, I really love your approach to that. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today, and I am really looking forward to hearing more from you. For our delegates who are listening, you can hear more from Gauri on March 1st, 2016 at 1600 UTC for her presentation titled A Sacred Model of Birth, Reality or Fantasy. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you online. Goodbye for now.